The lecture hall buzzed with quiet conversations as students filed in for Professor Zethkar's weekly physics seminar. The massive Altarian stood nearly 8 feet tall, his blue-gray skin gleaming under the artificial lights of the Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences. His forearms moved gracefully as he arranged his notes on the podium, each movement precise and calculated. Jake Murphy slipped into a seat near the back, his worn notebook clutched tightly in his hands. At 24, he was one of only 12 humans studying at the prestigious institute on Kepler 442b. The planet orbited a distant star 47 light-years from Earth, and Jake often felt that distance like a weight in his chest. Today, we discuss the fundamental impossibilities of faster-than-light communication, Professor Zethkar announced, his voice carrying easily through the hall. Specifically, we will examine why certain primitive theories continue to waste valuable research time. Jake's stomach tightened. He had a feeling this lecture was aimed directly at him. The professor activated a holographic display that showed complex mathematical equations floating in midair. Quantum entanglement networks remain the only scientifically valid method for instantaneous communication across galactic distances. Any other approach violates basic physical laws. A Centaurian. Student named Zarathek raised one of her 6 arms. Professor, what about the human theories regarding consciousness-based communication? Professor Zethkar's large black eyes fixed on Jake's section of the room. Ah, yes, the so-called resonance bridging hypothesis. A perfect example of primitive thinking disguised as science. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks as other students turned to look at him. He was the only human in the class, making him an easy target. The human brain, the professor continued, produces electrical activity, measured in microvolts. To suggest that such weak signals could somehow bridge interstellar distances through consciousness alone is not just wrong, it is laughably absurd. The holographic display shifted to show a human brain scan next to the complex quantum matrices used in standard communication arrays. The difference was stark. One looked impossibly simple compared to the other. Human intuition, Professor Zethkar said with what might have been a smile on his alien features, is merely pattern recognition evolved for survival on a single planet. It has no place in serious scientific inquiry. Jake's hand shot up before he could stop himself. The professor's eyes narrowed, but he nodded for Jake to speak. Sir, what if consciousness operates on quantum levels we don't fully understand yet? Human meditation practices have shown measurable effects on quantum systems in laboratory settings. A few students chuckled. Professor Zethkar's expression became cold. Mr. Murphy, is it? Your species has been studying quantum mechanics for barely 2 centuries. The Altarians have explored these principles for over 3 millennia. If consciousness could affect quantum systems across interstellar distances, we would have discovered it long ago. Jake stood up, his notebook trembling slightly in his hands. But what if different species experience consciousness differently? What if humans have a unique relationship with quantum fields that other species haven't considered? The chuckling grew louder. A Rigelian student named Vossahai made a sound that Jake had learned was equivalent to laughter. Unique? Professor Zethkar's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of mock amazement. Young human, your species still fights wars over resources and believes in supernatural concepts like souls and spirits. You suggest that such primitive minds have discovered something that advanced civilizations missed? Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment, but he pressed on. Sometimes being primitive means thinking differently. Maybe we notice things others overlook because we approach problems from unexpected angles. Unexpected angles, the professor repeated slowly. Or perhaps what you call intuition is simply your brain making random connections and hoping for luck. Science requires rigorous proof, not wishful thinking. The professor turned back to his holographic display, effectively dismissing Jake. As I was saying, consciousness-based communication violates several fundamental laws. First, the inverse. Square law dictates that any signal degrades rapidly over distance. Second, consciousness has never been proven to exist outside biological neural networks. Third, even if consciousness could somehow extend beyond the brain, it would require energy levels equivalent to a small star to bridge interstellar distances. Jake remained standing, his heart pounding. What if consciousness doesn't follow the same rules as electromagnetic radiation? What if it exists in quantum dimensions we can't measure with current instruments? Professor Zethkar slowly turned back to face him. The hall fell completely silent. Mr. Murphy, you seem determined to waste everyone's time with fantasy. Let me be perfectly clear. Consciousness is a biological process. It cannot exist independently of neural tissue. It cannot transmit information faster than light. It cannot bridge the void between stars. These are not opinions. These are scientific facts established by thousands of years of research. The professor's voice grew colder. Your human tendency to romanticize consciousness as something mystical is exactly why your species struggles with advanced physics. Until you abandon such primitive thinking, you will never contribute meaningfully to galactic science. Jake sat down heavily, his face burning with humiliation. Around him, alien students whispered among themselves. He caught fragments of their conversations, words like typical human arrogance and emotional thinking. Lisa Carter, his only close friend at the Institute, shot him a sympathetic look from across the room. She was one of the few other humans at the school studying xenobiology rather than physics. Professor Zethkar continued his lecture, but Jake barely heard the words. His mind raced with anger and determination. The equations floating in the holographic display seemed to mock him, their elegant complexity suggesting that everything he believed was foolish and wrong. After class, students filed out of the hall in small groups. Jake gathered his things slowly, hoping to avoid the stares and whispered comments. But as he reached the door, Professor Zethkar's voice stopped him. Mr. Murphy. Jake turned to face the towering alien professor. I suggest you focus your studies on established science rather than chasing impossible dreams. The universe operates according to physical laws, not human wishes. The sooner you accept this reality, the sooner you might actually learn something useful. Jake nodded stiffly and left the hall. In the corridor outside, Lisa caught up with him. Jake, don't let him get to you. He's brilliant, but he's also incredibly arrogant. Jake looked back at the lecture hall doors. He's wrong, Lisa. I know, he's wrong. Consciousness is more than just brain activity, I can feel it. Lisa sighed. Feeling isn't science, Jake. You know that. Then I'll prove it, Jake said quietly. I'll prove it scientifically. As they walked through the halls of the Institute, Jake's mind was already racing ahead to his small laboratory in the basement levels. He had work to do. The basement levels of the Galactic Institute were quiet and dim. Most students avoided these areas, preferring the bright, modern laboratories on the upper floors. Jake Murphy had claimed a small storage room here 2 months ago, converting it into his private workspace with permission from a sympathetic maintenance supervisor. The room smelled of metal and ozone. Salvaged equipment lined makeshift tables. Old circuit boards, discarded sensor arrays, and basic electronic components that other researchers had thrown away. Jake worked by the light of a single desk lamp, his hands steady despite the anger, still burning in his chest from Professor Zethkar's humiliation. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Lisa Carter peeked around the doorframe, carrying 2 cups of hot coffee from the student cafeteria. "I figured you'd be down here," she said, stepping carefully around the cluttered workspace. "You missed dinner." Jake accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thanks. I needed to get away from all those stares and whispers." Lisa settled onto a rickety stool, studying the strange device Jake had been building. It looked nothing like the sleek quantum communicators used throughout the galaxy. Instead of crystalline matrices and exotic matter conduits, Jake's creation resembled a hybrid between a meditation headset and a primitive radio telescope. Copper wires wrapped around a metal framework connected to basic electronic circuits and what appeared to be modified brainwave sensors. "Jake, what exactly are you trying to build here?" Jake set down his coffee and picked up a component that looked like a headband lined with small sensors. "A consciousness resonance amplifier. At least that's what I'm calling it." "That sounds like science fiction." "So did faster-than-light travel before we figured out how to fold space," Jake replied. "Look, I know it sounds crazy, but I've been having these dreams lately. Mathematical dreams. They show me equations and engineering diagrams that I don't consciously understand." Lisa frowned with concern. "Dreams? Jake, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you should talk to someone at the medical center." "These aren't stress dreams." Jake moved to another table where notebooks lay open, filled with complex calculations in his handwriting. "Look at these equations. I wrote them down after waking up, but I don't remember learning this mathematics. It's like someone else is teaching me while I sleep." Lisa leaned over the notebooks. The equations were incredibly complex, dealing with quantum field theory and consciousness studies that went far beyond standard physics courses. The handwriting was definitely Jake's, but the concepts were advanced enough to challenge graduate students. "When did these dreams start?" "About 3 weeks ago, right after I began meditating to deal with stress from Professor Zethkar's constant criticism." Jake ran his hands through his hair. "I know how it sounds, but these dreams feel different. More real than regular dreams. Sometimes I wake up with the taste of metal in my mouth, or my hands smell like electrical components even though I haven't been working on anything." Jake picked up one of the notebooks and flipped through pages covered with diagrams. "The dreams show me building this device. They explain how human consciousness might exist partially in quantum dimensions that we can't normally perceive. If that's true, then focused consciousness could theoretically interact with quantum fields across any distance. But Professor Zethkar proved that consciousness can't work that way. Professor Zethkar proved that Altarian consciousness can't work that way. But what if human consciousness is different? What if our brains evolved to access quantum dimensions that other species can't reach?" Lisa studied her friend's face. Jake had always been intuitive, often solving problems through leaps of insight that more logical thinkers couldn't follow. She had seen him work out complex equations by feel rather than step-by-step calculation, somehow arriving at correct answers through processes he couldn't explain. "Show me how it's supposed to work." Jake's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. He moved to the main device, which consisted of the headband connected to a complex array of electronic components. According to the dreams, human consciousness generates a unique quantum signature when we enter deep meditative states. This device should amplify that signature and focus it into a coherent transmission. He pointed to various components. These Sensors read brainwave patterns and convert them into quantum field manipulations. This array focuses the consciousness energy like a lens focuses light. And this receiver section should be able to detect consciousness transmissions from other humans regardless of distance. Have you tested it? Jake shook his head. I just finished the basic assembly tonight. But Lisa, I think it might actually work. The mathematics in my dreams are incredibly detailed. They show quantum equations that could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and physics. Lisa picked up the headband, examining the small sensors embedded in the fabric. What if you're wrong? What if these dreams are just your mind trying to cope with academic pressure? Then I'll have wasted a few weeks building an expensive paperweight, Jake said with a slight smile. But what if I'm right? What if consciousness really can bridge interstellar distances? What if humans have been sitting on the most powerful communication technology in the galaxy without realizing it? Jake moved to a wall covered with star charts and mathematical formulas. Think about it, Lisa. Human intuition has always been stronger than other species. We make logical leaps that Altarians and Centaurians find impossible to follow. We solve problems through insight and creativity rather than pure logic. What if that's because our consciousness operates on quantum levels that other species can't access? It would change everything, Lisa admitted quietly. Exactly. It would mean that human consciousness isn't primitive or weak. It would mean we're fundamentally different from other species in ways that could give us incredible advantages. Jake returned to his workbench and began making final adjustments to the device. The dreams have been getting stronger and clearer every night. Last night, I dreamed about specific calibration settings and frequency ranges. I woke up knowing exactly how to complete the device. Jake, this is either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both, Jake laughed. But I have to try. After today's humiliation, I need to know if there's any truth to my theories. If consciousness really can work the way the dreams suggest, then Professor Zethkar isn't just wrong, he's spectacularly wrong. Lisa finished her coffee and stood up. When are you planning to test it? Tonight. The dreams suggest that consciousness resonance works best during sleep states, when the conscious mind isn't interfering with quantum processes. Jake looked at his friend seriously. Will you stay and help? I might need someone to monitor the equipment while I'm in the meditation. State! Lisa hesitated. Everything about this seemed impossible and dangerous, but she had seen Jake's intuitive insights prove correct too many times to dismiss them entirely. Okay, she said finally. But if this thing starts affecting your brain in strange ways, I'm shutting it down immediately. Jake grinned and returned to his final preparations. Outside their small basement laboratory, the Institute slept peacefully, unaware that one determined human was about to attempt something that the galaxy's greatest minds had declared impossible. The clock on Jake's workbench showed 2:47 a.m. when he finally completed the last calibrations. Lisa sat nearby, monitoring a bank of basic sensors that would track the device's energy output and Jake's vital signs during the test. The basement laboratory hummed quietly with electronic activity. Are you sure about this? Lisa asked, watching Jake adjust the headband that would interface with his consciousness. We don't know what this thing might do to your brain. Jake checked the connections one final time. The dreams have been very specific about safety protocols. As long as I maintain a meditative state and don't force the connection, it should be harmless. He settled into a comfortable chair and placed the headband carefully on his head. The small sensors made contact with his temples and forehead, immediately causing several indicators on Lisa's monitoring station to light up. I'm reading unusual brainwave patterns already, Lisa reported. Your theta waves are spiking way above normal levels. That's expected, Jake said, closing his eyes and beginning to regulate his breathing. According to the dreams, consciousness resonance happens primarily in theta and delta states. Deep meditation should put me in the right frequency range. As Jake's breathing slowed and deepened, the laboratory's instruments began registering unprecedented readings. Energy levels that should have been impossible for such simple equipment started climbing steadily. Lisa watched in amazement as quantum field fluctuations appeared on her sensors, fluctuations that normally required massive particle accelerators to generate. Jake, I'm seeing quantum effects that shouldn't be possible. The field density around. Your position is increasing exponentially, Jake didn't respond. His breathing had become so slow and deep that Lisa began to worry he had lost consciousness entirely. But the brainwave monitors showed he was in a state unlike anything in medical literature. Not asleep, but not normally awake either. Then, the device began receiving a signal. At first, it was just random static crackling through the speakers Lisa had connected to the output circuits. But gradually, the static resolved into patterns that seemed almost like speech, if speech could be made of pure thought rather than words. Lisa? Jake's voice was distant and dreamy, though his lips barely moved. Are you monitoring the receiver array? Yes, and Jake, it's picking up something. But that's impossible. There shouldn't be any consciousness transmissions for the device to detect. Jake's breathing continued its slow, hypnotic rhythm. Check the quantum signature analysis. What's the source location showing? Lisa turned to a display screen that showed astronomical coordinates. Her breath caught in her throat. Jake, this is reading as Earth coordinates, specifically somewhere in North America. Boston, Jake whispered. It's my sister Amy. She's dreaming right now. The thought transmission grew stronger and clearer. Through the speakers, Lisa could hear something that sounded like a young woman's voice, though it wasn't quite audible in any normal sense. It was more like hearing someone's thoughts directly. Jake, is that really you? The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jake's lips moved slightly as he responded, though Lisa couldn't hear his side of the conversation through the equipment. But somehow, impossibly, someone on Earth was receiving his transmission. Amy, I need you to help me prove this is real. Can you tell me something specific about what's happening on Earth right now? Something I couldn't possibly know? The response came immediately. There was a solar flare yesterday that knocked out communication satellites over Europe. Mom called to check on you, but couldn't get through to the Institute. She's worried because the news said solar activity might affect space colonies. Lisa checked her personal communication device. Sure enough, there was a delayed message from Earth dated 3 days ago, explaining communication delays due to solar interference. But Amy was describing events that happened after that message was sent. This is impossible, Lisa whispered. Even if consciousness could transmit across interstellar distances, there's no way information could travel faster than light. Solar flare reports from Earth should take decades to reach us through normal channels. Jake's consciousness seemed to drift deeper into the connection. His conversation with Amy became more fluid and natural, as if they were sitting in the same room rather than separated by 47 light-years of space. Amy, I need more proof. Can you give me yesterday's lottery numbers from the Massachusetts State Lottery? The Mega Millions numbers were 7, 23, 31, 44, 52, and the bonus ball was 18. But Jake, how are you talking to me? I'm definitely asleep, but this feels more real than any dream I've ever had. Lisa quickly accessed the Institute's archived Earth data streams. The most recent lottery information they had was over a month old, but she made note of Amy's numbers for future verification. Jake, ask her about current events, things we can verify when the next data transmission reaches us. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Amy provided detailed information about recent Earth events, weather patterns, political developments, and even family news that Jake couldn't possibly have known. Most remarkably, she seemed to be learning and responding in real time, despite being asleep on a planet nearly 50 light-years away. Amy, this is the most important question. Are you consciously aware of this conversation? Do you remember talking to me? I remember everything perfectly. But Jake, something strange is happening. While we've been talking, I've been having flashes of scientific knowledge that I don't understand. Equations and theories about quantum physics and consciousness. It's like your knowledge is somehow bleeding into my dreams. Jake's eyes opened slightly, though he remained in the meditative state. Lisa, are you recording all of this? Every second, Lisa confirmed, her voice filled with awe. Jake, if this is real, if you're actually communicating with your sister on Earth through pure consciousness, then you've just revolutionized physics and communication technology simultaneously. The connection began to weaken as Amy's sleep cycle shifted toward morning. Her voice became fainter and more distant. Jake, I have to wake up soon, but I'll try to document everything I remember about this conversation. If this is real, if you've found a way to bridge space with consciousness, then you've discovered something incredible. I'll try to contact you again tomorrow night. Amy, whatever you do, write down everything you remember about this conversation and those equations you're seeing. They might be important. The transmission faded completely as Amy woke up on Earth. Jake slowly emerged from his meditative state, his eyes focusing gradually on Lisa's amazed expression. Did that really happen? He asked quietly. Lisa gestured to the banks of monitoring equipment, all of which had recorded unprecedented quantum field manipulations and consciousness-based energy transmissions. According to every sensor in this room, you just had a real-time conversation with someone on Earth. But Jake, that violates everything we know about physics and communication theory. Jake removed the headband carefully, his hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. Then everything we know about physics and communication theory is incomplete. He looked at the data readouts showing the impossible energy signatures his consciousness had generated. Professor Zethkar claimed it was impossible, but I just proved him wrong. Lisa stared at the recorded data, trying to process what she had witnessed. Jake, if this gets out, it will change everything, not just for humans, but for every species in the galaxy. Jake nodded, already thinking ahead to the implications. And that's exactly why we need to be very careful about how we proceed. Some discoveries are too powerful to share carelessly. As dawn approached on Kepler 442b, two humans sat in a basement laboratory, surrounded by evidence that consciousness could indeed bridge the impossible distances between stars. Jake spent the next week carefully documenting every aspect of his consciousness communication device while waiting for verification of Amy's information. When the delayed data transmission from Earth finally arrived, Lisa watched in stunned silence as every detail Amy had provided proved accurate. The solar flare timing, the lottery numbers, even minor news events she had mentioned. This is undeniable proof, Lisa said, reviewing the documented evidence. You've achieved faster-than-light communication using human consciousness as the transmission medium. Jake assembled his findings into a comprehensive report, including technical specifications, recorded conversations, and verification data. Despite his excitement, he felt nervous about presenting the discovery. Professor Zethkar's humiliation still burned in his memory. "Are you sure you want to take this to the review board directly?" Lisa asked. "Maybe we should start with a smaller presentation, build support gradually." "No," Jake said firmly. "The discovery is too important for political games. Besides, Professor Zethkar specifically challenged the scientific validity of consciousness-based communication. This proves him wrong in the most direct way possible." The following morning, Jake requested an emergency session with the Institute's Scientific Review Board. The board consisted of 5 distinguished researchers from different species, with Professor Zethkar serving as the senior physics advisor. The presentation took place in the same lecture hall where Jake had been humiliated weeks earlier. This time, however, he stood confidently at the podium while the board members reviewed his documentation. "Mr. Murphy," said Dr. Veltar, a Centaurian xenobiologist who chaired the review board, "your claims are quite extraordinary. You assert that you have achieved faster-than-light communication using human consciousness?" "That's correct," Jake replied. "I've established reliable two-way communication with Earth using consciousness resonance technology. The communication is instantaneous across 47 light-years of space." Professor Zethkar's 4 arms crossed skeptically. "And you expect us to believe that you accomplished in a basement what our most advanced research facilities consider impossible?" Jake activated a holographic display showing his recorded data. "The evidence speaks for itself. Here are quantum field measurements, consciousness transmission recordings, and independent verification of Earth-based information that couldn't have been obtained through conventional means." The board members studied the data carefully. Dr. Thexwe, a Rigelian mathematician, examined the quantum signature analysis with particular interest. "These quantum field fluctuations are genuine," she admitted reluctantly. "The energy patterns show clear evidence of consciousness-directed quantum manipulation, but the theoretical framework makes no sense according to established physics." "Because established physics doesn't account for the unique properties of human consciousness," Jake explained. "Human brains evolved differently from other species. Our consciousness exists partially in quantum dimensions that most species cannot access." Professor Zethkar stood abruptly, his massive frame radiating anger. "This is elaborate fraud, nothing more. Human consciousness cannot generate the energy levels required for interstellar communication. The laws of physics forbid it." "Then, the laws of physics are incomplete," Jake replied calmly. "Impossible!" Professor Zethkar's voice echoed through the hall. "You claim that primitive human intuition has discovered something that 3 millennia of Altarian science missed? Preposterous!" Dr. Veltar raised a hand for silence. "Professor Zethkar, please allow Mr. Murphy to complete his presentation." Jake continued displaying his evidence. Recordings of conversations with Amy, technical specifications of his device, and detailed analysis of the consciousness transmission process. But the board members' expressions grew increasingly skeptical, rather than convinced. "Mr. Murphy," said Dr. Kefsi, a vegan physicist, "while your data appears technically sound, the implications are simply too extraordinary to accept without independent replication. How do we know you haven't somehow intercepted classified Earth transmissions and fabricated this consciousness angle?" "Because consciousness transmission operates on completely different principles from electromagnetic communication," Jake explained. "The quantum signatures are unique and impossible to fake with conventional technology." Professor Zethkar slammed one of his large hands on the table. Enough of this nonsense. The young human has clearly developed some form of hidden communication technology and created an elaborate hoax to explain it. I move that we immediately confiscate his equipment and expel him from the Institute for Academic Fraud. Seconded, Dr. Thexwe said quickly. This level of deception cannot be tolerated in a serious academic institution. Jake felt his heart sinking as the board members nodded in agreement. But the evidence will be analyzed by qualified researchers who aren't emotionally invested in proving impossible theories, Professor Zethkar interrupted. Security will escort you to your laboratory to retrieve your equipment immediately. Within an hour, Institute security had confiscated Jake's consciousness communication device and all related equipment. The board's official ruling declared his research fraudulent and banned him from submitting papers to any major scientific journal. Jake was given 48 hours to prepare for expulsion from the Institute. Lisa found him sitting alone in his empty laboratory, staring at the bare tables where his equipment had been. I'm sorry, Jake. They're all so convinced that consciousness can't work the way you described that they can't accept evidence to the contrary. It's not their fault, Jake said quietly. Their entire understanding of consciousness is based on their own species' experiences. They literally cannot comprehend that human consciousness might operate differently. What are you going to do now? Jake pulled a small device from his pocket, a backup consciousness transmitter he had hidden before the board meeting. I'm going to continue the research. If the official academic channels won't accept the truth, then I'll find other ways to share it. Jake, you're banned from the Institute. Where will you work? There are abandoned mining tunnels beneath the Institute that go down for kilometers. The security sensors don't reach that deep, and I can set up a more advanced laboratory there. Jake's eyes burned with determination. Professor Zethkar thinks he's ended my research, but he's only driven it underground. Lisa hesitated, knowing that helping Jake would risk her own academic standing. But she had seen the impossible proof with her own eyes. What do you need me to do? Jake smiled for the first time since the board meeting. Help me gather supplies and equipment. If consciousness communication really works the way my experiments suggest, then other humans might be experiencing similar phenomena. I need to find them and build a network. A network of what? A network of human consciousness that operates outside official academic channels. If the galaxy's scientific establishment won't accept the truth, then we'll prove it ourselves. That night, Jake used his backup device to contact Amy again. This time, their conversation focused on finding other humans who might be experiencing consciousness-related phenomena. Jake, something amazing has happened, Amy reported through the quantum link. I've been having those scientific dreams you mentioned, and I shared them with my roommate, Casey. She's been having similar dreams about computer science and quantum algorithms that she doesn't understand. We think other people might be experiencing this too. Find them, Jake said urgently. Document everything and start building a network. If human consciousness really operates on quantum levels, then we might be able to create something unprecedented. A collective intelligence that spans interstellar distances. As Amy's transmission faded with the approach of Earth's dawn, Jake sat in his hidden laboratory deep beneath the Institute. Professor Zethkar had claimed consciousness communication was impossible and had used his authority to suppress the evidence. But Jake had proven him wrong once, and he would prove him wrong again. The difference was that next time, Jake wouldn't be working alone. The abandoned mining tunnels beneath the Galactic Institute stretched for kilometers into the planet's crust. Jake had found a large chamber nearly a mile underground, far beyond the reach of security sensors or casual discovery. Over the past month, he and Lisa had secretly transported supplies and equipment to create a hidden laboratory that was far more advanced than his original basement workshop. "The quantum isolation down here is perfect," Jake explained to Lisa as they installed the latest consciousness transmission array. "The rock formations naturally block electromagnetic interference, giving us a cleaner environment for consciousness-based experiments." Lisa connected power cables to a bank of quantum field generators that Jake had built using principles from his continuing dreams. "Have you made contact with any other humans besides Amy?" Jake's face lit up with excitement. "Not just contact. I've connected with an entire network. Amy found 12 other people on Earth who are experiencing consciousness dreams similar to mine. But it gets better. Some of them are scientists and researchers who are building their own consciousness communication devices." He activated a sophisticated control panel that made his original equipment look primitive by comparison. "Dr. Helen Cross at Stanford has been having dreams about neuroscience applications of consciousness physics. Sam Rodriguez at MIT dreamed about quantum field manipulation through human intention. Kate Thompson at Harvard received detailed linguistic protocols for consciousness-based communication." "This is starting to sound like something out of science fiction," Lisa said, though she had seen too much impossible evidence to doubt Jake's claims. "It's more than individual dreams now," Jake continued. "When we connect through consciousness resonance, we're sharing knowledge directly. Scientific problems that would take individual researchers years to solve are being tackled by multiple minds working in quantum synchronization." Jake sat down at the consciousness interface chair, which now looked like advanced alien technology despite being built from salvaged components. "Tonight I'm going to attempt something unprecedented. A group consciousness connection with all 12 Earth contacts simultaneously. Is that safe? You've never tried connecting to multiple people at once. The dreams suggest it's not only safe, but necessary for the next phase of development. Human consciousness appears to be naturally designed for collective networking. We might be on the verge of discovering humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage." As Jake prepared for the night's experiment, Lisa monitored an array of sensors that tracked quantum field fluctuations, consciousness energy levels, and biological functions. The equipment registered readings that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. "Initiating connection sequence," Jake announced, settling into the meditative state that enabled consciousness transmission. Beginning with Amy's signal as the primary anchor, the laboratory's instruments immediately detected the familiar quantum signature of Jake's consciousness extending beyond normal space-time boundaries. But tonight, the readings quickly escalated beyond anything they had recorded before. "Jake, I'm seeing massive quantum field amplification. Your consciousness is generating energy patterns equivalent to a small fusion reactor." Through the communication speakers, Amy's voice emerged with crystal clarity. "Jake, we're all here and ready. Casey built a quantum amplification system based on the dreams she's been having. Dr. Cross is monitoring our collective neural activity. Sam has quantum field generators online. This is incredible. I can sense all of their minds even before you make the full connection." Jake's breathing slowed to the deep rhythm of advanced meditation. "Initiating group consciousness link. Everyone, maintain relaxed awareness and let the quantum resonance guide the connection." What happened next challenged every assumption about human consciousness and communication. One by one, additional voices joined the quantum transmission, as Jake's device connected with consciousness communication arrays across Earth. But these weren't separate conversations. They were components of a single, unified discussion occurring across multiple minds simultaneously. "This is Dr. Cross. I'm monitoring unprecedented neural activity in all participants. Our brainwaves are synchronizing across 47 light-years of space." Sam here. "The quantum field readings are off the charts. We're generating controlled quantum effects that normally require particle accelerators costing billions of dollars." Kate reporting. "The linguistic patterns we're using aren't following normal language rules. We're communicating through direct concept transfer rather than words." Lisa watched in amazement as the conversation evolved into something beyond human experience. The 12 people on Earth weren't just talking to Jake. They were thinking together, sharing knowledge and insights directly through quantum consciousness resonance. "Jake," Amy's voice carried excitement and awe. "We're solving scientific problems in real time. Dr. Cross just shared her understanding of neural quantum interfaces directly with Sam's knowledge of field manipulation. They're creating new theories, together at the speed of thought. And I'm receiving linguistic frameworks that explain how consciousness-based communication works on a fundamental level," Kate added. "The mathematical principles are flowing directly into my mind from multiple sources simultaneously." The group consciousness session continued for hours. Lisa documented breakthrough discoveries in quantum physics, neuroscience, computer science, and linguistics that emerged from the collective thinking of the networked minds. Problems that individual researchers might struggle with for years were being solved through collaborative consciousness in minutes. "Lisa," Jake said without opening his eyes, his voice distant but clear, "are you recording the scientific outputs from this session?" "Every equation, every theory, every breakthrough," Lisa confirmed. "Jake, what you're doing is revolutionizing multiple scientific fields simultaneously. These discoveries could advance human technology by decades or centuries." Through the quantum link, Dr. Cross reported additional developments. "Jake, we've discovered that the consciousness network isn't limited to communication. We're able to influence physical systems through focused intention. Casey just modified her computer's quantum processors using pure consciousness direction. And I've been manipulating quantum field generators through mental focus alone," Sam added. "The consciousness network is giving us direct control over quantum mechanical systems." As Earth's dawn approached, the group consciousness session gradually wound down. But the participants had accomplished something unprecedented. They had created a functional collective intelligence that operated across interstellar distances through pure human consciousness. "Tomorrow night we're going to attempt something even more ambitious," Amy reported as the connection weakened. "We want to try connecting with humans on other colonies and space stations. If consciousness resonance works across any distance, we could potentially network every human in the galaxy." After the session ended, Jake emerged from his meditative state exhausted but exhilarated. "Lisa, we've proven that human consciousness is fundamentally different from every other known species. We're not just individuals. We're components of a potential collective intelligence that could revolutionize civilization." Lisa reviewed the recorded data from the session. "The implications are staggering. If humans can network their consciousness across galactic distances, share knowledge instantaneously, and control quantum systems through intention alone, then we're not the primitive species that aliens think we are. We're something entirely different," Jake agreed. "And Professor Zethkar has no idea what he dismissed when he rejected consciousness-based communication. Above them, the Galactic Institute slept peacefully, unaware that in the tunnels beneath their feet, a small group of humans had just taken the first steps toward creating a consciousness-based civilization that would challenge every assumption about intelligence, communication, and the nature of sentient life itself. The Human Consciousness Network grew exponentially over the following weeks. Amy and her team on Earth had successfully connected with human colonies on Mars, Europa, and 3 deep space research stations. Each new connection strengthened the collective intelligence and revealed new capabilities that individual humans had never imagined possible. We're documenting phenomena that challenge basic assumptions about reality, Jake explained to Lisa as they reviewed data from the latest network session. Yesterday, the Mars colony participants successfully manipulated their atmospheric processors using pure consciousness direction. They adjusted oxygen levels and atmospheric pressure through focused intention alone. Lisa studied the reports flowing in from across human space. The Europa Research Station claims they're accelerating their underwater exploration using consciousness-enhanced sonar systems. And the deep space stations are reporting that consciousness-focused navigation is more accurate than their quantum computers. Jake nodded, reviewing a communication from Dr. Cross. Helen's team has made the most significant discovery. They've proven that human consciousness generates what she calls quantum coherence fields that can influence matter and energy at the molecular level. It's not just communication. We're directly interfacing with physical reality. The underground laboratory had expanded significantly. Jake and Lisa had excavated additional chambers and installed equipment that rivaled the Institute's most advanced facilities. But unlike conventional scientific equipment, their technology was designed to work with human consciousness rather than replace it.
Jake, there's something I need to tell you,
Lisa said hesitantly.
My academic performance at the Institute has changed dramatically since we started these experiments. I'm solving problems in xenobiology that have puzzled researchers for years.
How is that possible? You're not directly connected to the consciousness network, but I'm exposed to it constantly down here. I think proximity to consciousness resonance fields is affecting my cognitive abilities. I'm making intuitive leaps that go far beyond my training. Jake frowned with concern. Are you experiencing any negative effects? Changes in personality or memory? No, just enhanced problem-solving abilities and occasional flashes of scientific insight that I can't explain. Lisa hesitated. Actually, it's wonderful. I feel like I'm thinking more clearly than ever before, but it's making me stand out at the Institute. Have any of the professors noticed? Dr. Veltar commented on my recent research papers. She said my approaches to xenobiological problems show unprecedented creativity for a human student. Lisa looked worried. I think she's becoming suspicious. Jake realized that their underground activities were beginning to affect the world above them in ways they hadn't anticipated. We need to be more careful. If the Institute discovers that consciousness resonance enhances human cognitive abilities, they'll want to study it, and probably try to control it. That evening's Consciousness Network session included 43 humans from locations across the solar system and beyond. The collective intelligence had evolved to the point where scientific breakthroughs were occurring during every session. Jake, this is Amy. We've made contact with the human research station orbiting Proxima Centauri. They're reporting that consciousness networking has allowed them to solve engineering problems that were blocking their terraforming project. Dr. Cross here. We've discovered that the consciousness network isn't just sharing knowledge. It's actually creating new knowledge through collective quantum processing. We're thinking thoughts that no individual human brain could generate alone. Sam reporting from MIT.
The consciousness-directed quantum systems we've developed are performing calculations that exceed our most powerful supercomputers. We're processing information at quantum speeds through pure human intention. But the most significant development came from Kate Thompson's linguistic research. Jake, I've decoded something important about the consciousness communication protocols. Human consciousness operates on quantum frequencies that are completely unique among known species. No other sentient race can access these quantum dimensions. What does that mean practically? Jake asked through the quantum link. It means that consciousness networking might be exclusively human. Other species evolved different cognitive structures that give them advantages in logic and calculation. But humans evolved consciousness that exists partially in quantum dimensions. We're the only species capable of this type of collective intelligence. The implications sent excited discussions throughout the network. If humans were unique in their ability to network consciousness across space and time, it meant they possessed capabilities that could revolutionize galactic civilization. There's more, Kate continued. The quantum consciousness fields we generate are beginning to affect space-time itself. The Mars colony reports that consciousness-focused experiments are creating measurable gravitational anomalies. And the Europa station is using consciousness resonance to communicate with the primitive life forms in the subsurface ocean, added Dr. Cross. We're making contact with alien species through quantum consciousness bridging. Jake felt excitement and concern in equal measure. The human consciousness network was developing capabilities that went far beyond communication. They were discovering that human awareness could directly influence physical reality on a fundamental level. Everyone needs to document these developments. Carefully, Jake said. We're making discoveries that could change our understanding of consciousness, physics, and humanity's place in the galaxy. After the session ended, Jake and Lisa sat in their underground laboratory, trying to process the implications of what they had learned. We're not just building a communication network, Lisa said quietly. We're discovering that human consciousness is fundamentally different from every other known species. We might be the only race capable of this type of quantum awareness. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Which explains why Professor Zethkar and the other alien academics couldn't understand consciousness-based communication. Their species literally cannot think the way humans think. What happens when they discover what we're doing down here? I don't know, Jake admitted. But I have a feeling that discovery is inevitable. The consciousness network is growing too large and too powerful to remain hidden much longer. Above them, in the Institute's halls, alien students and professors continued their conventional research, unaware that beneath their feet, a revolution in consciousness and physics was taking place. The human consciousness network was preparing to reveal capabilities that would challenge every assumption about intelligence, reality, and the nature of sentient life. Professor Zethkar had claimed that consciousness-based communication was impossible. Jake had proven him wrong. But what they had discovered was far more significant than communication. They had found that human consciousness was a force of nature that could reshape reality itself. The question was no longer whether they could prove their theories. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for the truth about human consciousness. Professor Zethkar stood in his private laboratory, staring at data that challenged everything he believed about consciousness and physics. For weeks, he had been secretly analyzing the confiscated equipment from Jake Murphy's experiments, hoping to expose the fraud he was certain lay behind the impossible claims. Instead, he had discovered something that shook his understanding of sentient life. Computer, display the quantum field analysis from the human device, he commanded. Holographic projections filled the laboratory, showing energy patterns that should have been impossible for biological organisms to generate. The quantum signatures were genuine and unprecedented, indicating that human consciousness could indeed manipulate quantum fields in ways that Altarian science considered physically impossible. Computer. Cross-reference these patterns with known consciousness studies from all galactic species. No matches found, the computer responded. The quantum signatures are unique among all recorded sentient species. Professor Zethkar's 4 arms crossed in frustration. He had spent 6 decades studying consciousness and quantum physics, but the human data challenged his most fundamental assumptions. According to every measurement, Jake Murphy had actually achieved faster-than-light communication through pure consciousness manipulation. Soft chime indicated an incoming message. Dr. Veltar's image appeared on his communication screen. Professor Zethkar, I need to discuss some unusual observations about our human students. What kind of observations? Lisa Carter's recent academic performance has been remarkable. She's solving xenobiological problems that have puzzled our best researchers. Her approaches show insight that seems impossible for her level of training. Professor Zethkar felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. Have you investigated the source of her sudden improvement? That's what concerns me. Her breakthrough. Solutions began appearing shortly after we confiscated her friend's equipment. I'm wondering if there might be a connection. I'll be right there. Professor Zethkar made his way to Dr. Veltar's laboratory, where the Centaurian xenobiologist had compiled detailed records of Lisa's recent work. Look at this analysis of symbiotic organism interaction, Dr. Veltar said, displaying Lisa's latest research. She's identified quantum biological processes that our species missed despite centuries of study. Her intuitive leaps are scientifically sound but theoretically impossible. Professor Zethkar studied the data carefully. Lisa's work showed the same type of quantum consciousness interface patterns he had discovered in Jake's confiscated equipment. Dr. Veltar, I need to share something with you, but it must remain strictly confidential. Professor Zethkar activated privacy shields around the laboratory. I've been analyzing the Murphy humans' equipment in secret. The results are deeply troubling. Troubling how? The device actually works. Human consciousness can manipulate quantum fields in ways that our science considers impossible. Dr. Veltar's 6 eyes widened in shock. But that would mean human consciousness operates according to physical laws that we don't understand, laws that might be unique to their species. Professor Zethkar displayed his analysis of Jake's equipment. Human neural structures are fundamentally different from ours. Their consciousness exists partially in quantum dimensions that other species cannot access. They're not primitive. They're operating on cognitive levels we never imagined possible. Dr. Veltar studied the data with growing amazement. If this is accurate, then humans aren't just different from us. They're potentially more advanced in ways we never considered. There's more. Professor Zethkar activated additional displays showing his theoretical calculations. If human consciousness really operates in quantum dimensions, then they could potentially network their awareness across any distance. They could create collective intelligences that span entire galaxies. That's impossible. Consciousness cannot exist independently of neural tissue. Altarian consciousness cannot exist independently of neural tissue, Professor Zethkar corrected. But human consciousness appears to follow different rules entirely. The 2 professors worked through the night, analyzing every aspect of human neurology and consciousness studies available in the galactic databases. What they discovered revolutionized their understanding of sentient life. Human brains evolved differently from every other known species, Dr. Veltar observed. Their neural networks include quantum coherent structures that we dismissed as evolutionary accidents. Because we assumed consciousness worked the same way for all species, Professor Zethkar replied, we projected our own cognitive limitations onto humanity without realizing they might have evolved capabilities we lack entirely. Professor Zethkar accessed historical records of human behavior and achievements. Look at their scientific development. Humans make intuitive leaps that more logical species find impossible to follow. They solve problems through creativity and insight rather than pure calculation. We always attributed this to primitive thinking, but what if it's actually advanced quantum cognitive processing? Their art, their music, their literature, it all shows pattern recognition and creative synthesis that goes beyond normal logical processes, Dr. Veltar added. We interpreted it as emotional thinking, but it might be quantum consciousness expressing itself through traditional channels. As dawn approached on Kepler 442b, Professor Zethkar faced a decision that would define his scientific legacy. He could maintain his position and deny the evidence, preserving his reputation but ignoring revolutionary discoveries. Or he could admit that his understanding of consciousness had been fundamentally flawed. Dr. Veltar, if we're correct about human consciousness, then Jake Murphy didn't just achieve faster-than-light communication. He revealed that humanity possesses cognitive capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization. What are you suggesting? Professor Zethkar looked at the evidence one final time. Quantum signatures that proved human consciousness could manipulate reality at the fundamental level, theoretical frameworks that explained phenomena beyond conventional physics, and implications that challenged every assumption about intelligence and awareness. I'm suggesting that I made the greatest scientific error of my career when I dismissed human consciousness research, and now I need to decide whether to protect my reputation or pursue the truth. Dr. Veltar studied her colleague's expression. What will you do? I'm going to do what any real scientist should do when faced with evidence that challenges their theories. Professor Zethkar began preparing a comprehensive analysis of his findings. I'm going to admit I was wrong and help investigate the most significant discovery in galactic history. The review board will not appreciate being told they made an error. The review board will have to choose between scientific truth and academic pride, Professor Zethkar replied. And if they choose pride over truth, then they don't deserve to call themselves scientists. As Professor Zethkar compiled his findings into a formal presentation, he reflected on the irony of the situation. He had built his career on the assumption that Altarian consciousness represented the pinnacle of mental evolution. Now he was discovering that humans, the species he had dismissed as primitive, might possess the most advanced consciousness in the galaxy. Jake Murphy had claimed consciousness could bridge interstellar distances. Professor Zethkar had declared it impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. The human had been right, and the professor had been spectacularly wrong. The question was whether the galactic scientific community would be willing to accept a truth that challenged everything. They thought they knew about consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of sentient life itself. The emergency session of the Galactic Institute's full academic council drew representatives from dozens of species across known space. Professor Zethkar stood at the podium in the Institute's largest auditorium, facing hundreds of the galaxy's most distinguished scientists. His presentation would either revolutionize their understanding of consciousness or destroy his career. "Colleagues," Professor Zethkar began, his 4 arms steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. I stand before you today to present evidence that challenges our fundamental assumptions about consciousness, physics, and the nature of sentient life. In the audience, Jake Murphy sat with Lisa Carter in a section reserved for graduate students. After weeks of hiding underground, Jake had been quietly reinstated pending Professor Zethkar's review of his research. The professor had personally apologized for the earlier dismissal, though Jake didn't yet understand the full scope of what Zethkar had discovered. 3 months ago, I publicly declared that consciousness-based faster-than-light communication was physically impossible, Professor Zethkar continued. I dismissed human theories about consciousness resonance as primitive thinking. Today, I must report that I was profoundly wrong. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the auditorium. Professor Zethkar was renowned for his rigid adherence to established science. For him to admit error was unprecedented. Through detailed analysis of confiscated research equipment and independent verification studies, I have confirmed that human consciousness operates according to quantum principles that differ fundamentally from all other known species. Professor Zethkar activated holographic displays showing the quantum signature analysis of human consciousness. Human neural structures include quantum coherent elements that exist partially outside normal space-time. This allows human consciousness to manipulate quantum fields directly and communicate across any distance instantaneously. Dr. Kefsi, the vegan physicist who had voted to expel Jake, stood up in protest. Professor Zethkar, surely you're not suggesting that human consciousness violates the laws of physics? I'm suggesting that human consciousness operates according to physical laws we didn't know existed, Professor Zethkar replied. Laws that other species cannot access because we lack the necessary neural architecture. The presentation continued with detailed evidence of human consciousness capabilities. Professor Zethkar displayed recorded quantum field manipulations, verified faster-than-light communications, and theoretical frameworks that explained how consciousness could function as a fundamental force of nature. The implications extend far beyond communication, Professor Zethkar explained. Human consciousness appears capable of directly influencing matter and energy at the quantum level. They can manipulate physical systems through focused intention, process information at quantum speeds, and create collective intelligences that span galactic distances. In the audience, alien scientists struggled to process information that challenged everything they believed about consciousness and intelligence. Species that had considered themselves intellectually superior to humans were being told that humans possessed cognitive capabilities they couldn't even comprehend. But how is this possible? Asked Dr. Thexwe, the Rigelian mathematician. How could human consciousness access quantum dimensions that our more advanced civilizations cannot reach? Because consciousness evolution followed different paths for different species, Professor Zethkar explained. Altarians developed logic and calculation abilities. Centaurians evolved advanced pattern recognition. Rigelians specialized in mathematical processing. But humans evolved consciousness that exists partially in quantum dimensions. Professor Zethkar displayed comparative analysis of different species' neural structures. Human brains include quantum-coherent microtubules and neural networks that operate according to quantum mechanical principles. Their consciousness isn't limited to classical physics the way ours is. This explains human intuition and creativity, added Dr. Veltar, who had joined the presentation. What we interpreted as primitive emotional thinking is actually quantum consciousness processing information in ways we cannot duplicate. The revelation sent shockwaves through the auditorium. Alien scientists who had dismissed human cognitive abilities were being told that humans possess the most advanced consciousness in the galaxy. "Are you saying that humans are mentally superior to the rest of us?" demanded Dr. Kefsi. "I'm saying that humans are mentally different in ways that give them unique advantages," Professor Zethkar replied. "They don't think better than us. They think in ways we cannot." Jake stood up from his seat, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Professor Zethkar, may I demonstrate the practical applications of consciousness resonance?" Professor Zethkar nodded, and Jake moved to the front of the auditorium. From his pocket, he produced a small consciousness communication device, an advanced version of his original prototype. "I'm going to establish contact with the human consciousness network that now includes over 300 participants across human space," Jake announced. Jake activated the device and entered the meditative state that enabled consciousness transmission. Within moments, voices began emerging from the device's speakers, not just individual voices, but a collective consciousness speaking with unified purpose. "This is the human consciousness network," the voices said in perfect unison. "We represent 312 human minds connected across 47 light-years of space. We are demonstrating collective quantum processing capabilities." The alien audience watched in stunned silence as the consciousness network proceeded to solve complex mathematical problems in real time, manipulate quantum fields to create visible energy displays, and demonstrate processing speeds that exceeded the Institute's most powerful computers. "We are not separate individuals communicating," the network explained. "We are components of a collective intelligence that thinks with quantum consciousness. This is humanity's contribution to galactic civilization. The ability to network awareness across any distance and process information through quantum cognitive methods." Professor Zethkar addressed the amazed audience. "This is what I failed to recognize 3 months ago. Jake Murphy didn't just achieve faster-than-light communication. He revealed that human consciousness represents a completely new form of intelligence." The consciousness network continued its demonstration, showing how human awareness could influence physical systems, solve scientific problems through quantum processing, and create technologies that work through intention rather than conventional engineering. "The question before us," Professor Zethkar concluded, "is whether we will accept this evidence and expand our understanding of consciousness, or whether we will cling to outdated assumptions about the nature of intelligence." Dr. Veltar stood to address the council. "I move that we formally recognize consciousness physics as a legitimate field of study and establish a new department to investigate quantum consciousness phenomena." "Seconded," said Dr. Thexwe, who had been convinced. By the overwhelming evidence, the vote was unanimous. The Galactic Institute officially recognized consciousness physics and offered Jake Murphy a position as the galaxy's first professor of consciousness studies. As the session concluded, Professor Zethkar approached Jake with genuine respect. "Mr. Murphy, I owe you more than an apology. You've revealed discoveries that will change our understanding of consciousness and intelligence forever." Jake smiled and extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "Professor, science is way about discovering truth, not protecting egos. Your willingness to admit error and investigate the evidence shows true scientific integrity." Professor Zethkar accepted Jake's handshake, then made an unexpected request. "Would you be willing to teach me about consciousness physics? I believe I could learn much from studying human cognitive methods." "I'd be honored to have you as my first alien student," Jake replied.
As news of the discovery spread throughout the galaxy, human consciousness networks continued expanding and evolving. What had begun as Jake Murphy's attempt to prove a single theory had become humanity's revelation as a species uniquely capable of quantum consciousness. The Human Consciousness Network established permanent stations throughout human space, enabling instantaneous communication and collective problem-solving across galactic distances. Human technology advanced exponentially as networked consciousness tackled scientific challenges that individual minds couldn't solve alone. In the final scene, Jake stood before a mixed class of human and alien students in his new laboratory at the Galactic Institute. Professor Zethkar sat in the front row, eager to learn about consciousness physics from the species he had once dismissed. Consciousness isn't just a byproduct of intelligence, Jake explained to his attentive students. It's a fundamental force of the universe that humans have learned to harness. We're not smarter than other species. We're different in ways that complement their abilities. Jake gestured to Professor Zethkar. Altarian logic combined with human quantum consciousness creates possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. The future of galactic civilization lies not in competition between species, but in collaboration that takes advantage of our unique cognitive strengths. As the class ended, Jake reflected on the journey.